Hello and welcome to the Superhero Show. I'm Daniel. This is Chris. You know the deal by now. So this week everyone's talking Avengers. We got an awesome new trailer. We've got loads of stuff up on site. We've got Rewind Theatre, a discussion about what the hell is that in the forehead of the Vision. It's an Infinity Stone, probably. And we're not going to discuss the trailer too much because you've all seen it. We've got loads of stuff. We have previously discussed what the best moment in the first Avengers trailer, but I think that's pretty obvious. It's this. So we're going to talk about something else related to the Avengers, aren't we, Chris?
We are, because Wolverine, aka Hugh Jackman, has been talking about whether or not he'd like to join the Avengers.
Yeah.
The same interview he gave to me last May, pretty much, but it's back again, and I guess it's because of what's happened with Spider-Man and him joining the MCU.
Yeah.
It makes this all seem a little bit closer. It's more realistic that these team ups and substitutions and transfers can happen.
Studios putting their differences aside and work towards something that fans will appreciate.
Putting their differences aside, or just seeing dollar signs?
Well, let's talk about the mechanics firstly before we get into the specifics. The thing about Spider-Man, obviously, it was Marvel's is the prodigal son, the most valuable hero, the most treasured character. Meant a lot for them to get it back. Also, Sony were losing their way with the character. On the other hand, Fox are doing really well with the X-Men. It feels like we're entering in a new kind of golden era for the X-Men after The Last Stand. They've really got it back on track with Days of Future Past.
Yeah, Marvel are spreading it around, aren't they? They've got money coming in from all these different characters, whereas X-Men is Fox's cash cow and Spidey is Sony's cash cow. But it's working for one and not the other. So yeah, like you say, the Sony one makes sense for both parties. The Fox one, who knows how up for it they'd be to say, oh yeah, take our most prized possession, who's making us $800 million every year or two.
Yeah, and I think Spider-Man reverted for two reasons. Obviously, we talk about money, and we think money is what makes Hollywood tick, and it does for the most part. But those Spider-Man movies did okay. We did rankings. It wasn't a huge disparity between that and some of the other superhero movies. I think the thing that made it switch back was fans just didn't like it. It was like creative continuity is what Feige said, and it just didn't feel authentic Marvel. Whereas Fox stuff, even though it's a different universe, cinematic universe, it does feel authentic.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a bit of an obstacle because fans still like what they're doing.
Yeah, and they haven't all been great on the Wolverine side of things, have they?
No, the spin-offs. The second one's not too bad.
Yeah, the first one, I couldn't stand though.
Yeah, it's a lot of bad stuff.
But yeah, he was talking to Yahoo, and Jackman said, I think as an optimist, I would love it. I'm surprised by what's happened with Spider-Man joining. You're in a very complex world where big sums of money are being spent for different franchises, and so getting them together is difficult. 2 years ago, I'd have said you have to be a real optimist to think it'd ever happen. But weirdly now, I think it just maybe could. I think there is the possibility it will happen. So him coming out and saying that is also big. I mean, Fox want to keep him happy, and who knows if a deal could be done with characters going the other way and characters from the Marvel universe playing in the X-Men movies.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that he can say that, like, what was the quote again? This could happen.
Yeah.
He thinks it could happen. Do you think that's a testament to the fact that Jackman's such a big star? He can kind of say that stuff and get away with it.
Yeah, but also I think he always has though. He's always been really honest,
positive, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a really honest guy when you interview him.
Yeah, because last May when I asked him about all these kind of tricky questions that I thought he'd kind of palm away, he answered them all honestly. Like, as a fan, he was like, you could see him getting excited when I asked him who he'd like to see, if we could see Wolverine fight anyone, who would it be? And you could see him like going, oh yeah, that's, and then he came back with Hulk, which again would be, we're going to talk about what he would bring to that universe. I think the most exciting thing is what he wanted, which is Wolverine to fight Hulk. Who wouldn't want to see that?
If you go back to Wolverine's first appearance, it was in a Hulk comic. They took each other on, so that's that would be really cool to recreate that on the big screen.
Yeah.
There's no doubt he'd get in a fight with Hulk at some point. I mean, those two bad, rage-filled characters they're gonna square off at some point. It'll be quite fun. I don't know how much fun to shoot it would be because I'm sure I'd be on the worst end of it. But hey, he can heal. So
and that would be painful because he's fighting a CG character.
Yeah,
he's going to be the one getting.
He's going to be fighting a tennis ball, a massive tennis ball.
But that would be cool. What do you think Wolverine would bring to the Avengers then?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the Avengers, unlike the X-Men, obviously the X-Men are a team defined by the origins of their powers, so it stems from a mutation. The Avengers over the years have been much more kind of a free-flowing, freeform team where different members can come and leave depending where they are in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Stephen Strange has been an Avenger, Luke Cage, Daredevil, and Wolverine has been. Like in Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers, Wolverine was a part of that team for a good few years.
Yeah.
But I think what we were talking about earlier on, I think he would fit in with the MCU incarnation of the Avengers quite well. The first film, they refer to themselves as a time bomb. They don't get on that well. They square off quite a lot. And it seems, based on the trailer that comes out this week, in the second movie, even though they do like each other and they will fight for each other, it's still not harmonious team.
Yeah.
There's a lot of friction there in play, even when they'll say, okay, and there's got to be friction because we know where we're heading with a film called Civil War around the corner.
Yeah.
And it feels like within that mix, having that guy, another kind of bristly, kind of cantankerous character would really fit in quite well.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be that much of a crowbar.
He'd be swapping one dysfunctional family for another.
Yeah.
And he's got the charisma as well, the actor has, to go toe to toe. We're always saying this. Like whoever plays Spider-Man, that's tough to walk into this world where all these big shots are around you.
Yeah.
But, you could really see Jackman. He said in both interviews, both the one with the eye and the one with myself, that he'd love to go toe to toe with Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man as well. And I think that would be great fun.
If you think about it, there's probably the two most charismatic actors on the planet, I think.
Yep.
Jackman's great.
And we had that conversation a while ago about who delivered the greatest superhero performance. And I think my pick was Christopher Reeve, but the other two we talked about were Downey Jr. and Jackman. So you'd see two of the very best, on screen together, which would be really special, I think.
I'm going to be a spoilsport. I'm going to introduce Spanner into the works.
Oh no, what are you going to do, Dad?
So
are you going to show that bit of the Avengers trailer again?
Before I ruin everything, can we just have a look at that little bit from the Avengers trailer again? Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. Ooh. Yes, please. Now I'm going to ruin everything. So Spider-Man was allowed to come into the MCU because they recast. If we did get Wolverine does not exist in this universe. He exists in Fox's X-Men universe. I don't know whether that could happen.
Yeah.
Even though I'm willing to disavow everything that's happened in Fox's universe to have Jackman as Wolverine in that MCU.
Yeah.
I just think the logic that they've got in place might not allow it.
Simon Kimber can figure something out.
Yeah. It was reset all the timelines.
It was all a dream.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So would you accept seeing Wolverine played by a different actor?
No. I don't want a different actor. That's my point. I want them to just who cares? Just go for it. Don't worry too much about the logic.
Yeah.
Logic does not exist in comic book worlds to a fanatical degree. Just go with it. Because I've seen Hugh Jackman fight in the Civil War, in the original Civil War. I've seen him fight in Vietnam in the Second World War. I've seen him go into the future and into the past. He's my Wolverine, and he knows that character better than anyone else.
Yeah.
So we said, we feel sorry for the guy who has to come after Andrew Garfield or whatever. Feel sorry for the guy who one day has to be Wolverine after Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
Has played him in 20 movies.
Yeah, yeah. And we talked about that with Downey Jr. as well. That's coming soon. Yeah. Are we sure that Wolverine isn't in Avengers Age of Ultron?
There's a little cheeky tease, isn't there? Loads of is that Wolverine? It's not Wolverine. It's definitely.
It looks like a claw.
Yeah.
In the dark, really fast.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe something to do with Hawkeye's arrows.
Hawkeye. He's got 3 arrows in his back in this.
But obviously, Joss Whedon is a very smart man. He wrote X-Men for a number of years, Astonishing X-Men. He knows what he's doing. It's obviously a cheeky illusion.
Do you think that's on purpose?
Absolutely.
Really?
You can't have designed something like that and have it ejecting on camera and not realise what that looks like.
Yeah.
They've definitely done that to be cheeky.
Interesting. It's kind of making me want to see that bit from the trailer again.
Yeah.
Can we do it again, Rich, please? Nice. Ooh. Nice.
All right.
Should we do some feedback?
Yeah, let's get on to feedback quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I've got the first one from Andrew Nandlal. I think I've said that right. Sorry, Andrew. On the last episode, you discussed the topic of violence and mature rating in the superhero movie genre. Yeah, we did. You should go check that out if you haven't seen it already.
It's a classic.
One of the best ones ever. Assuming Fox and Marvel were able to remake a mature rated Wolverine movie, who would you recast as the more violent incarnation of Wolverine? I would choose Andrew Lincoln. I believe he showed every emotion that consumes the character of Wolverine on The Walking Dead.
Interesting.
I think that's an amazing shout.
Yeah.
Andrew Lincoln, obviously, British actor. So
yeah, superheroes have to be British. Well, they won't necessarily recast him if they do a more violent one. And also, we did say last week that the Deadpool movie might, in that universe, we might get the more violent Wolverine.
Like, if you're watching a Deadpool sequel that has Wolverine, it's a slightly different tone.
Yeah.
It's like a different imprint, is what we said.
But if they recast him, who would you... Have you got any ideas?
Just to go back to Andrew Lincoln, I've caught up with The Walking Dead, no spoilers.
Yeah,
but just over what you've seen in Walking Dead so far, that is a man who has lost people in violent ways, a man who has had to embrace violence to save people he loves. So it's perfect for Wolverine. It's a great kind of show reel for Wolverine if you ever wanted to audition. You could just dump off the box sets for The Walking Dead.
You'd hope that people would have seen it in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's quite a big show.
Well, and also that bit in Love Actually with the cards, so that's also good. So can we show a clip of that? Because I think that shows his sensitive side. I'd like to see that.
That bit when he played a character called Egg in This Life.
That too.
Anyone else? Have you got a suggestion?
On the pitch. So if they do Old Man Logan,
yeah,
and this is kind of fan service, but it'd be very good. And do Grey Scott.
Yes. Who missed out on playing Wolverine because of scheduling conflicts with Mission Impossible 3.
So I think that'd be really interesting. Although I would say Jackman for everything.
I was going to say, it'd be a bit weird if they did Old Man Logan without Jackman. No, he's actually getting old.
It'd be really good if in an alternate universe... That's I say, do Grey Scott in the MCU, because it's an alternate universe.
Wow, that's a good idea. I tell you an actor who was supposed to play Wolverine. He's not with us anymore, sadly, but in the 80s, I remember this getting talked about, Bob Hoskins. Stan Lee was trying to get a Wolverine movie made. They talked
Smee,
and from what I remember, they spoke to James Cameron, and there was talk of Catherine Bigelow potentially directing it, and it was going to be, from what I remember, I think Bob Hoskins was going to be Wolverine and Angela Bassett was going to be Storm. I might be making that up, but
are you drunk?
He's short though.
All these loads of people are short. I'm short. You're short.
He's really short though.
Bob Hoskins gone.
Oh no, you don't like that, do you?
I love Bob Hoskins, but I don't think the guy...
He's a tough guy as well. When he was playing thugs and gangsters in the 80s, we're going back to the 80s now.
Yeah.
All right, you're not with it.
Things were different in the 80s. Different world. Bob Hoskins could be Wolverine.
No, I don't want to see another Wolverine, but the two I quite like is Joel Edgerton, keeping it Australian. You're a fan of his, aren't you?
I really like him.
I was rewatching Warrior and I was like, oh yeah, man, he is really
brutal,
good. And someone who recently turned down a superhero role, Joaquin Phoenix. I think he'd be cool. I think there's something wolf-like about him.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And he could bulk up. I don't know. I just think he'd be a cool choice. And he's not very tall.
Yeah,
he's about my height.
Good.
Anyway, just some.
I think it was a good suggestion.
Throwing them out there. I've got a slightly longer email, but some good stuff in here. Some Mahonry Stewart says, I just watched your discussion about a possible X-Men Fantastic Four crossover. And although I like the ideas thrown around about the two teams taking on Galactus and the Silver Surfer, I think there is an equally compelling threat from comics lore that could unite the two teams, the Dark Phoenix. X-Men The Last Stand did such a shoddy job with this classic storyline. I think we need a palate cleanser with the most famous X-Men storyline of all time. I believe with the Fantastic Four's history of space exploration, they would give a great excuse to allow the X-Men to launch into space where that story belongs. Yeah. It could also be a good excuse to bring in characters like the Skrulls that figure prominently in Fantastic Four lore, as well as the Shire and the Brood for the X-Men. The X-Men franchise has been grounded on planet Earth for too long. The Fantastic Four are just the boost they need to bring them into their space-based adventures, which are so prominent in the comics.
I think it's a really good shout, because I wonder, everyone looks at what everyone else is doing in Hollywood. I wonder if Fox look at Disney and Marvel, what they're doing with their movies ago. Introduce the Cosmic.
Yep.
They've got the Chitauri and all that, the Kree and the going on. Let's have a bit of that.
Yep.
In Fantastic Four, we know they're introducing the End Zone.
Yep.
So maybe they're laying some brick.
Everyone's going space. There's talk.
They've got to go space these days.
They talk about He-Man as well as ramping up, and I think that's because of Guardians, like a direct response to that one. I don't know if they do Dark Phoenix again, but I do think that Fantastic Four could be a really good launching pad for space.
They're definitely looking back at old storylines, obviously Days of Future Past and Apocalypse for adaptation, but again, maybe too recent.
Yeah.
Next bit from Keegan Brittain. Have you given any thought to how Peter Parker will look at these other superheroes? Whether or not he's been superheroing before Civil War, he will have grown up watching these other heroes on TV, being in middle school at the time of the Battle of Manhattan, I think, and I believe he will have idolised them. Just imagine being a teen in this world of giants and then suddenly being right up there with your greatest hero, only to watch them try to rip each other apart. So he thinks that he might have been doing it in quiet, and that's why we don't know about him yet.
Yeah.
He might be Vigilante Spider-Man still a little bit. Obviously, Vigilante is going to be introduced on Netflix.
Or just before he becomes Spider-Man, he's seen this stuff on the telly.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool idea,
especially when they said he's going to be 15, 16.
Yeah.
That's natural, isn't it?
The odd kid that you've seen in Avengers who looks up to them towards the end,
Imagine. That's really weird. Imagine this if he has like a Captain America action figure or an Iron Man or both.
Yeah,
and he's watching TV before he gets bitten by the spider.
Like Agent Coulson when he meets Captain America.
That's really cool.
And running on from that one, Nemanja Pavlovic says, what do you guys think of the idea that Marvel Sony shouldn't reveal their casting choice for Spider-Man until he reveals himself by taking his mask off in Civil War? The idea literally blew my mind. So that your own idea blew your mind.
And then he was somehow able to write it in.
You've got super.
It's like scanners.
That's such a great idea. I mean, that would be. Imagine if they could keep it a secret until opening night.
It would be one of the greatest event movies of all time to find that out.
Being in that first screening. Because you know the excitement. We've been there when it's been the first screening of a Marvel movie, waiting for the post-credit sequence when you don't know what it is. Yeah. That's exciting enough, but imagine waiting to see...
imagine the tension and not...
it would never happen, but...
Yeah. Actually, on the subject of Spider-Man in Civil War, last week we recorded a live podcast, the IGN UK podcast in Glasgow with Mark Miller.
Yep.
The guy who actually wrote Civil War. And he showed his thoughts on Marvel getting Spider-Man back, how you adapt that book for the big screen. Yep. He says loads of interesting stuff.
Some funny things about DC movies.
Funny stuff about DC movies, his love of Superman.
Yeah.
Whether they'll ever make a great Ghost Rider movie.
Yep.
So definitely check that out if you like the show, because he says loads of really cool stuff.
Yeah, cool. And thank you as ever for all your emails. We got an avalanche this week, and sorry I could only read out 4 of them.
We'll do some more next week.
But if you want to write to us, the address is superheroshow@ign.com.
Yep. And until next week, for everything on Marvel, DC and all the rest, stay right here on IGN.